I switched my monitor to 250 Hz and something genuinely weird happened. Not wow, this looks smoother weird. I went back to a 60 Hz screen after 7 days and I felt physically nauseous. So let's talk about what's actually going on inside your eyeballs, because it's darker than you think. Okay, so for context, I've been gaming on a 144 Hz monitor for the past 2 years. Thought I was living the dream, smooth, fast, butter. Then I got my hands on a 250 Hz display for a week-long test. And I went in as a skeptic. Like, come on, 250 Hz? That's overkill, right? That's marketing department energy. That's we ran out of numbers to put on the box. Except it wasn't. And by day 3 of this experiment, I had a theory about why. And it has nothing to do with what the monitor companies are telling you. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand refresh rates in a way that most people, including a lot of tech YouTubers, genuinely don't. Alright, quick level set. And I promise this won't feel like a science class. Refresh rate is literally just how many times per second your monitor redraws the image. 60 Hz equals 60 times a second. 144 Hz equals 144. 250 equals 250. Simple, right? But here's the thing nobody explains properly. Refresh rate and frame rate are not the same thing. They're roommates who don't always get along. Your GPU is rendering frames, your monitor is displaying them. If those two aren't in sync, you get screen tearing, stuttering, or that weird ghosting effect, where fast motion looks like a smear of peanut butter. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The human eye doesn't have a frame rate. That's a myth. Your visual system is continuous, not digital. It doesn't sample the world at 60 frames per second like a camera. It's always on, always processing, which means the higher your refresh rate, the closer your display gets to mimicking real analog motion. So the question isn't, can you see above 144 Hz? The question is, what does your brain do with the extra information? Okay, wait. Before I get into what actually happened to me during those 7 days, I need to show you something. Watch my hand. When you do that in real life, you see motion blur. Natural, smooth, biological blur. Your brain is filling the gaps. Now imagine a monitor doing that for you. 250 times a second instead of 60. Less gap filling required. Less cognitive load. That's the thing nobody's talking about. It's not just about seeing faster. It's about how hard your brain has to work. So day 1. I plug in the 250 Hz monitor. Fire up the game I've been playing. Doesn't matter which one. Let's just say it's fast-paced, competitive, lots of movement. And honestly, my reaction was underwhelming. I know. You expected me to say it was like seeing the face of God. It wasn't. It felt slightly smoother, that's it. I also made a video right there called 250 Hz is a scam and went home. But then day 2 happened. I started noticing something specific. And this is the thing I can't stop thinking about. I was making decisions faster, not because I was smarter, not because I suddenly had better reflexes, but because the visual feedback loop, the time between things happening on the screen and my brain processes it, got shorter. There's actually a term for this, input lag perception. Even when your actual input lag is identical, a higher refresh rate feels more responsive because frames are being delivered to your eyes more frequently. You're getting more visual updates per second, so you react to more recent information. Day 3. I noticed I was getting tired less quickly during long sessions, which I didn't expect. And when I looked into why, it made total sense. A 60 Hz monitor, your monitor is essentially flickering. Very fast, but it's still on-off, 60 times a second. Some people are acutely sensitive to this. Migraines, eye strain, that heavy feeling after a long session. Higher refresh rates reduce that perceptible flicker. Your eyes are doing less compensating. Here's something the monitor companies definitely don't want you to overthink. 250 Hz only makes sense if your GPU can actually hit 250 frames a second. Because if you're running a game at 80 FPS on a 250 Hz monitor, you're not getting 250 Hz, you're getting 80. The monitor's just refreshing with the same frame multiple times. So before you spend $600 on a new display, we need to talk about that in a second. Okay, so on day 4, I went full research goblin. I wanted to know, scientifically, what the actual ceiling is. Like, at what point does more hertz stop mattering? And this is where it gets genuinely fascinating, because the research is messier than either side wants to admit. There was a study out of MIT, from their computer science and AI lab, where researchers demonstrated that humans can perceive individual images presented at up to 13 milliseconds. But, and this is the crucial part, that experiment was about recognizing an image. Gaming isn't about recognition. Gaming is about tracking motion, anticipating movement, reacting to changes. And those are processed by completely different parts of your visual system. Your peripheral vision, for example, is way more sensitive to motion than your central vision. Some researchers have found motion sensitivity in the periphery can track changes well above 200 Hz. This is why high refresh rates feel different, even when you can't articulate why. There's also the concept of temporal contrast sensitivity. Basically, how well your brain picks up changes in brightness over time. And studies on this suggest the human visual system has meaningful sensitivity up to around 500 Hz in optimal conditions. 500 Hz. So we're not even there yet as an industry. By the way, if you actually want to test something like this for yourself, there's a tool a lot of people in the focus space have been raving about. It uses sound frequencies based on theta brainwave research, and there's a 7-minute audio routine that's been getting wild reviews. I'll throw the link in the description for anyone curious. Now, here's where the experiment took a turn I genuinely didn't see coming. Day 5. And I need you to stay with me for this part, because this is the thing that actually changes how I think about this. Day 5, I had to switch back to my old 144 Hz monitor for a meeting. Screen sharing thing, different setup, whatever. And I noticed something immediately. Everything felt sluggish, like the world had lag. My cursor felt like it was swimming through syrup. I'd been on 250 Hz for 5 days. My brain had recalibrated. This is a real neurological thing. It's called perceptual adaptation. Your brain is insanely plastic. It constantly adjusts its expectations based on what it's receiving. Feed it 250 frames per second for 5 days, and it starts treating that as the baseline. Drop back to 144 Hz and your own brain tells you something is wrong. Now, here's the part that kept me up at night. And I don't mean that hyperbolically. I mean I was genuinely lying in bed thinking about this. If your brain can adapt upward that quickly in 5 days, what does that mean for people who've been on 60 Hz their whole lives? Because from a 60 Hz perspective, 144 Hz looks incredible. From a 144 Hz perspective, 250 Hz looks like an overkill. But for a 250 Hz perspective, everything below it starts to look broken. It's not that higher refresh rates are objectively better or worse. It's that your reference point determines your reality, which is either very zen or very unsettling, depending on your mood. Anyway, let's talk about money, because none of this matters if you're buying ramen with a side of buyer's remorse. Here's my honest take, and I'm not sponsored by anyone here, so take this at face value. 250 Hz is not for everyone, and I mean that without judgment. If you're gaming at 1440p or 4K, most 250 Hz monitors are still running at 1080p. You're trading resolution for refresh rate. Whether that trade makes sense depends entirely on what you play. Fast, competitive games, tactical shooters, fighting games, battle royale, the high refresh rate is genuinely going to matter. You will notice. The research backs it up, and my week backs it up. Slower games, RPGs, strategy, anything story-driven, honestly, you could game on 144 Hz and have an identical experience. Save your money, buy the game instead. The GPU thing I mentioned earlier is real, and it matters. You need to be consistently hitting close to 250 frames per second in your games to actually benefit from the display. If your GPU is outputting 130 frames per second on a 250 Hz monitor, you're essentially running a very expensive 130 Hz monitor, which is still good, but not the purchase you made. For the sweet spot right now, 144 Hz is still the best value in the market. It's the point where the price to performance ratio makes the most sense for most people. 250 Hz is for the enthusiasts, the people who've already maxed out everything else and want the last 5%. And here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with being that person, but know what you're buying. But I saved the most important thing for last, because there's one part of this whole experiment that genuinely surprised me, and it's not about the monitor at all. After 7 days at 250 Hz, the thing I actually came away thinking about wasn't refresh rates. It was how quickly we adapt to new normals, and then can't imagine living without them. 3 years ago, 60 Hz was fine. Then I got 144 Hz, and 60 Hz became unbearable. Now 250 Hz has messed with my 144 Hz baseline. And this isn't a monitor problem. This is a human problem. We are genuinely terrible at valuing things we already have. The science calls this hedonic adaptation, the tendency for humans to return to a baseline level of happiness regardless of what happens to them, positive or negative. We upgrade, we adapt, we want the next thing. Which doesn't mean you shouldn't upgrade your monitor, but it does mean be honest with yourself about why you want it. Is it because it'll genuinely improve your experience? Or because you've already decided 144 Hz isn't enough? Both answers are valid, by the way. I just think it's worth knowing which one it is. So 7 days, 250 Hz. Here's the verdict in one sentence. It's real, it's noticeable, it's not magic, and your brain will absolutely hold it against you if you go back. If you want me to do a full comparison, 60 versus 144 versus 250, same game, same GPU, tracked frame data, let me know in the comments. And if you've already made the jump to high refresh rate, drop your number below. I'm curious what people are actually running. Alright, see you in the next one. If today's video helped you out, and you want to actually try the brain audio thing I mentioned earlier, the link is in the description and pinned comment. It's the same one I keep going back to. Worth a look.